Good afternoon. Welcome back for a new conference. This one is in English, and it's about European Proptech, one opportunity or too many clusters. And just to moderate this debate, I'm asking Matthias Flatin, VC partner at Axelo Capital, to come. Hi, Matthias. You can welcome him too. Yes, please applause. Thank you. So, Matthias, now you're in charge.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. So, Matthias Flatin, partner at Axelo Capital and fund manager of PropTech fund investing in Europe at seed stage, Axelo PropticOne. I'm happy to be here today with you and with the panel I will introduce. So, Europe, one opportunity or too many clusters. Basically, to introduce the subject, the topic a little bit, in Europe, real estate is a patchwork of hyperlocal markets, various regulations, various ways to design, build and operate buildings. It is so clusterized that even powerful corporate players confess that investing in foreign countries for them is risky, rarely leads to a successful outcome. As powerful as they are, they prefer to stay in their historical playground. On the other hand, startups, when their innovation is based on digital tools, at least, usually have the capacity to remain country agnostic and adapt their product to local needs, local culture, regulations. Because most of the time they remain asset light, they are able to test international markets more easily than real estate players who, because of their heavy assets, you understood, they remain stuck to the land, to the brick and mortar, to the local authorities, local network regulations. So today, this panel takes place in front of a PropTech and French audience, and English speaking, I hope. And as we all need to start somewhere, I imagine most of the audience is focused on the French market. For PropTech founders, international can be seen as well as costly, risky, dispersion. However, as PropTech investors, even though our funds were barely created a few years ago, we already meet each other quite often on the European stage, European startup scene. I think we can all agree that if there is an opportunity to build leaders in PropTech, it is not only in France, UK, or Germany, it is at European scale, which is very important. So, what I'd like today is to discuss this unique European opportunity for real estate startups to play with international arbitrages based on the experience of the investors of this panel. What are the pros, cons of opening a foreign market for a local startup? When to look for it, at what stage, how to choose your next destination, and most of all, why should you think about it? So today I'm happy to welcome you all in person because we've been working together for nearly 2 years for some of you, co-investing without even meeting in person. I'm pleased to welcome our panelists, some of the most active VCs in European PropTech. So I will call Natasha Terinova. You're a director at Reach UK and Second Century Ventures, and also a lucky co-investor of Axelo since yesterday. Thibaut Weston-Smith, principal at Realty Corporation UK, also a lucky co-investor of Axelo, and we are lucky too. Konstantinos Costa Matsoukas from PropticOne Germany, senior associate. Looking forward. And the most famous, Othman Zrikem, chief digital officer at AO PropTech. Please. Okay. Welcome, guys. I will start with Othman and Thibaut. Can you start with a short introduction of your VC? And secondly, just to remain at European scale for a start, can we do a short brief about the maturity of European PropTech according to you? Othman?
Sure. Thank you again, Matthias, for introducing us. So I'm co-founder and chief data officer at AO PropTech. We're one of the largest venture capital firms dedicated to real estate technologies in Europe. And we have this view that anything that is in innovation within the real estate world, and that's throughout the life cycle, from consumption, construction, asset management, monetization, is something that is ripe for disruption through digital and data technology. So we're looking at all this value chain, and we also foresee anything that is related to climate-conscious technology within real estate. So that's pretty much part of what we're looking at. In terms of stage, we think that there is a lot of opportunities when it comes to Europe across all type of opportunities within stages. That means from seed basically to pre-IPO. As of now, in many geographies, there are much more opportunities when it comes to seed and Series A, obviously. But we think that within the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to be like a maturing market, fueled by M&A of smaller companies, but also some of them which find a better market fit and internationalization strategy that will bolster the capability of those companies. So if I had to step back and look at the European market, there is definitely like a big trend coming from the more mature one financially. So UK market is really renowned because you have just much more deals going there. It doesn't mean that real estate technology is more mature. It's just that the VC market as well as the entrepreneur technological market is more mature there. So no surprise about it. But when it comes to continental Europe, I've been very surprised within the last 3 years since we've launched AO to see that there are truly good innovation in all of the geographies, and that includes very small countries such as Denmark or things in the Nordics. Obviously, France is a very interesting one, spending quite a lot of time looking at it, as you have the ability to scale within a market that is truly big, and also German market is really relevant. So I would say that from where we stand now, we see that the 2 core markets that will kind of drive the next wave of innovation are really France and Germany.
Thanks. Thibaut, short intro, and what do you think about Europe?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Matthias. Very honored to be here today. My name is Thibaut Weston-Smith. I'm moitié français and half English as well. I'm a principal at Realty Corporation, and we do 3 things. We invest in real estate. That's our first mission and line of work. We advise real estate clients, and we do PropTech. And we deploy our own balance sheet in PropTech. We started to be very active in the past year or so. We've invested in about 5 companies in the past 6 months. On the early stage side, super excited about what's going on in Europe right now. To give you some context about why I'm super excited about the growing European scene in PropTech, I just recently this year came back from a few years working in America, in Africa, and I'm super excited between the time I came back to Europe almost a year ago now and what we're seeing today, how fast the market is evolving and changing. A few months ago, I remember seeing one of these rankings where you see all the real estate PropTech funds of the world, and I think there were 4 European companies on this one, including 2 around this table, the 2 on this side. I think if we looked at this ranking 2 years ago, there'd probably be only 1 European firm on this. And so I'd like to start with this on your question, Matthias, which is how European PropTech is growing. I think it is growing. It is behind what has happened in the US and in Asia. But there are positive tailwinds, and there's a growing fundraising aspect on the PropTech VC side, whether it's both more money and more specialized capital that is continuing to grow, which is helpful on the capital side. The other aspect that I'm seeing as very positive and exciting is on the startup side, where you're seeing more startups that are growing faster, that are capable of structuring ideas, reaching out to customers, developing business plans, building a team with the support of investors that can fast deliver on their targets. So I think when we look at this, and it's, as we said, we're coming out finally from 2 years of a COVID period where we've all spent time behind our screens, and this has been actually a big accelerator for any PropTech trends. But what I find interesting is how fast PropTech startups are growing right now, have access to capital, and there are still plenty of things that need to be improved. And whether it's the fragmentation of our market here, how do you grow faster, the potential for new expansion, etc. But I think there's a lot of positive momentum here, and we're super excited about this.
Thank you. Natasha, Costa, your turn, same exercise. Can you introduce yourself, your VC? And the question will be a little more different because as non-French investors or half French or like Thibaut, I'd like to know what you think about the French PropTech ecosystem. If you started to look at it, you've invested in it, you've seen a lot of deal flow, so I'm curious to hear what you think about that. How advanced is it compared with the rest of Europe? What are its forces, weaknesses? Natasha, please.
Hello. Oh, yeah. everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for having me on the stage. It's always wonderful to travel to Paris. Just to put things in a bit of perspective about Second Century Ventures, who I represent today. We are a US-based global PropTech fund. We support early-stage businesses. And what makes us slightly different from a traditional venture capital organization is that we have one LP. And our LP is the National Association of Realtors, which is an organization, I think it's the largest trade body in the world. It's a 5 billion brand with about 100 bilateral partnerships in 80 countries. So we have a double mandate, if you want. So we are tasked by the industry to go and find technology that adds value to realtors and market practitioners. And this technology, of course, has to be commercially successful. What I do personally for Second Century Ventures is I run the technology scale-up program. And this means that every day I go out and I speak to the industry to understand where the need for technology is, what do they find usable, what do they find must-have. And the way it translates to the technology companies in our portfolio is that it helps them to increase adoption of their solutions within the market space. So I work out of London, but we have offices in the US, obviously that's the mothership. And we also have offices in Australia and Canada. Now, about the French ecosystem. So I think it's a really good day because we've just announced the deal where we co-invested with Axelio, which is super. And it's a wonderful company. It's in robotic cleaning and commercial real estate, which I found in France, actually. Last time when I was traveling here to Propel at MIPIM. So what I think translates really well across geographies is sustainability. And that's one of our laser focuses. So there may be technologies that are tremendously hard to scale on a pan-European basis because of the legislative framework. But technologies that we typically speak to, we get excited by something that we can help scale cross-border and cross-jurisdiction. So for that, probably legal tech wouldn't be number one. However, in 2008, our first investment was in a little company called DocuSign. So Notarize is also one of our portfolio companies. So there's some crossovers there. In terms of maturity, I think you guys are a lot better placed to comment on that because I only scope the French market out of the UK and I look for very specific things. I met a lot of interesting startups that helps ESG efforts for both commercial and residential. But I think that's sort of where it ends. I did have a sweep on the floor here at the conference. And I know it's only a small snapshot of what's happening in French ecosystem. But by and large, what I saw is that the companies are primarily aimed at domestic markets. Not very many of them are ready to go international, nor they know how. And typically, when I was coming up to some stands and they were expecting me to be an estate agent. And when I was saying I'm an investor, I said, ooh. So yeah, that's kind of, that's the experience of yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Costa?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Costa, and I'm the investment manager or the head of investment at PropticOne. As you said, I think all of the PropTech funds in Europe, they're kind of new. Maybe we're like the grandpa because we are already founded like 3 years ago in 2018 by Nico, Marius, and Anya, with the idea that back then, when we make a sounding in the market, what was missing? The founders back then, they had great ideas and built great products, but the biggest problem for them was to actually gain traction. So to find traditional players that would take over the solutions and say, okay, we go from traditional to digital, and not just having an agenda which says at some point in the future we will go digital. So what we said is, instead of creating a fund with a lot of money, we created a fund with a lot of network. So any investor that is invested in PropticOne today is somehow connected to the value chain of a building. So we have architects, we have facility managers, we have asset managers, we have banks that purely finance real estate projects, and with them together, we basically create hypotheses or assumptions about certain segments, how the future of this segment will look like, and based on that, look for companies in this segment. This does not mean that we're a strategic investor. We're purely financially driven. However, it helps us a lot to understand the market better by actually grabbing the problems from the ones who face the problems. Recently, PwC joined the fund, which makes us not only like a prop tech based fund, but still there's always room for other investors to join the fund. We've done 12 investments all over Europe. Usually we invest between seed and Series A with a ticket of 0.5 to 1 million and follow up until 3 million. And what I think about the French ecosystem, so I think that in general, France is like a very, very big economy, meaning that the ground floor to grow a startup in France itself is very, very good. And from my understanding, the political structure to basically become a founder in France and getting early stage investments, it's much better than in Germany. In Germany, you can apply for early stage investments, governmental investments, but it's very bureaucratic. So it's a very long tail thing, and you rather go through family and friends. From my understanding, in France, it's much easier to get early stage investments, so to basically become a founder if you have a good idea. And this is what we also see when companies from France come to Germany and ask us, hey, do you want to invest in a French company? We're sometimes a little bit suspicious because we always think you have such a great ecosystem, and if you come to Germany, there must be some hiccup. So if you didn't make it like in France, then you come to Germany, but it's not like this. And especially if you go around here, I was 2 weeks ago at Expo, which is supposed to be one of the biggest real estate fairs, and the startup sector was way smaller. So you had like a lot of nice big booths, but here you have like plenty of booths, like plenty small stalls where you can speak and meet the people, and I think this is a clear sign.
Thank you. Many opportunities in France, deep market, and suspicious if they want to come to Germany. Good learnings. Thanks. Thibaut, Costa, first, if we go back to the European scale, could you share with us the main tech verticals you're actively following in Europe these days? And secondly, where is the best place for these thematics to start? I mentioned arbitrages initially during the introduction. And we won't mind if you don't mention France all the time. The idea is just to gather everyone from Europe. Thibaut?
Sure. So I'm going to answer the question without answering the question, I think. We invest in companies and in all sorts of companies. We look at everything. So we're super generous, and this is in line with what we're doing on the real estate side. So I will look at everything that comes through, and so we have a process in place with our team to make sure that we don't miss on the exciting opportunities that are out there. Now, we have criteria to deploy capital, and therefore, for example, as I mentioned, we invest in early stage, so from seed to Series A. We want to see some revenues, potential, understanding the product, of course, something that is a good fit, especially, and has synergies or a good understanding of what's going on the real estate side for us. So one of the drivers for us here is that we look more at B2B companies than B2C. Now, that said, the exception to the rule is that we've done 2 of our 7 deals are B2C companies, including one with Axeleo that we're super proud of. And a company called Beanstalk, just giving their name out there. So I think however, to perhaps narrow down the scope of what I see as being exciting right now in the market, and again, to tie this to more the real estate side where I spend half of my time as well. Everything that is tied to ESG is actually something of strong interest for us. And this is not just because, we all care about the planet, we all know about the pollution of the construction and real estate sector as a whole. Everybody talks about the 40% of CO2 emissions represented by the real estate world. It's not just that, it's the fact that today there's really a consciousness of all real estate players along improving this. And what does that mean? That means that budgets are being freed up within real estate players. And that's both on the LP side, so limited partner side, so investors, and on the general partner side, so operators, whether it's real estate developers, asset managers, property managers, etc. Everybody's trying to figure out how to be more sustainable, how to be more socially driven, and to be mindful of how to improve on these targets and on ESG KPIs. So what does that mean? That means that there are plenty of opportunities to be grabbed in that sector for companies that have the right idea by using technology to improve on the ESG side. So this is what excites me a lot right now in the sector, and without giving any specific sector, because we look at the hospitality sector, the commercial space as well, like office buildings, logistics, on the residential, whether it's residential individuals or B2C, exciting as well, but more on the B2B side. But I think there are plenty of good ideas that can improve any of the broken systems that we've inherited from the past. And when I say broken, I don't think they were wrong. It's just that today we have technology that can improve the ways we're doing things. And things are slowly changing along this, but there's now, I think, a lot of people ready to use technology and have the budgets to do so, and are willing to jump the gun in trying these things. So that's where I would, if I were to advise people who are looking to form a company in PropTech, be mindful of ESG, and even if it's not the core business, have in mind that ESG is always going to be one of the first questions that you ask yourself, and an investor coming into the room will ask ourselves.
Thank you. Costa, any thematic, European-wise, you'd like to share?
Yeah, so very similar. We started last year analyzing the needs for ESG, and we created, based on that, a deep dive, which you can all download from our website. We created basically all the processes we need in order to find startups that are ESG, not by process, but by DNA, and we constantly look for that. And the reason why we do that is, it's twofold. So once we think there is a need today to do something that will help the traditional companies to reach all the climate goals that the politicians have put in place. But on the other side, we also think that ESG was the tipping point that the real estate industry actually needed in order to start to wake up. What I said before is we started our fund with the idea that we create a network environment for startups to basically help them grow. However, ESG and climate change is the tipping point that is basically like the natural enhancer. So one good example, for example, this year we invested in a company called Desana, which helps companies or corporates to make the move from a headquarter to a headquarter in a flexible office situation. So it's like the digital backbone to manage the complexity of getting 10,000 people from one headquarter to all over the city flexible office situations. And they grew, I think, 7,000% this year. What I want to say with this is, if you have something in the market that helps you to move from push to pull, or the other way around, it's really an enhancer. And this is why we think ESG and climate change is basically the push that the market needed to go from a nice to have to a must have. And this is why we also think it's also financially a very, very good play if you move into this direction as a founder. And where to look for this? So I always refer to VCs as truffle picks, meaning that you always need to have multiple sources. It's not like you only look in France or in different regions. You always need to be connected to everybody. This is why we always speak. We speak like every 3 months, once a time, to connect, to interchange, to understand the thoughts of everybody else. But also we speak with professors at universities to understand the technologies that are currently emerging. We also speak with serial entrepreneurs because they get a much more diverse deal flow that we get. Of course, they don't have the time to analyze it, but we have. So having like multiple sources to get deal flow and to get technology is very, very important.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'd like to ask the same question, if you don't mind, Othman and Natasha, about the main thematics, and then let's talk about the worldwide global view. But first, any thematics? I know ESG as well, very important.
I really like what I hear on this panel because I think we need the world consensus on how important this is. And I actually come to real estate from the clean tech background. So I worked a lot in decarbonization of last mile. I did a lot of projects in bioplastics. And when I started back in March 2020, it wasn't as loud. It just wasn't as important. And all of a sudden then pandemic came and it surfaced so many things and investors started being more active, real estate started being more active. There's of course, you know, the EU Green Deal. There's an incredibly ambitious target from the UK government, which is to reduce 50% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 from the baseline of 1990. I mean, is it achievable? We don't know. There's a lot of talk at the moment. There's very, I guess, you know, from my side, I'd like to see the higher adoption rates from the traditional real estate of some technologies. In terms of the sort of what we see helps companies to approach their clients is having a very strong data points on the ESG targets, whether this is actually environmental or social, although the social is an incredibly interesting subject because I think we have the least consensus on what social good is and how to measure it and how to improve it. So in our US portfolio, there's wonderful companies that are helping real estate, commercial real estate mainly actually now, on the to electrify their buildings, so to use the sustainable sources of power. We will actually have these companies coming to London as well for the next week's show. In the UK, at the moment, we saw so many interesting businesses in that space. And I actually think, just as I said before, ESG translates really well cross-border. With the minor changes in some of the countries' regulations. I spoke to this wonderful startup recently. What they do, they create reuse reports for the developers to show exactly how many materials they've reused. And they give the exact data on, for example, how, what materials are reusable after the demolition and renovation. In Oslo, currently, there's a law that makes developers give this reuse reports. So I think it starts fantastically there, but then there's an entire ecosystem of, you know, of investors and communities that really help these companies grow. And I think, you know, definitely, you know, we're here, one of those.
And in a few words, where is European Proptech compared with US, Asia? Very in a few words, because I'd like to talk about the why, the how afterwards.
In the US, what we see in the US, especially I think quite relevant for the crowd here, because we are backed by the National Association of Realtors, the markets are so different in the UK, Europe and the US. In the US, the realtor or your property professional is a lot better off in terms of commission. So they have 8% commission, for example, in comparison with 1 to 2% in the UK. So they are a lot more open to technology adoption. They have more money to spend. The tech penetration in that side of business is a lot higher than in the UK. That's your quick sentence.
Thanks. Otman, if I come back, main thematics, and what do you think about the European position, the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think that I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I've been impressed within the last 2 years by the many co-investors from the US coming to me for actual deal flow in climate tech. Because obviously in Europe, and specifically if you look at some of the markets in the Nordics, France, as well as Switzerland, you have much more maturity about the climate consciousness, and therefore you have, let's say, entrepreneurs with very good background in material science or things which are related to the actual life cycle. So we've seen a lot of things emerging from there. So there is a bit more maturity when it comes to the intent. It doesn't mean that there is maturity in terms of business model or monetization, which is let's say the next big topic, where actually US and American players might just catch up or even be faster than the European ones. But definitely now there is a big ground that we're currently assessing, and I think it's an advantage for the European ecosystem, and that would be the intersection between what we call climate tech and construction technology. So I spoke about material science, but that would be also a lot of things related to the simulation within the actual footprint of a new building before it is built. So this is the kind of technology or approach that you had, for example, in automotive, or that you had, for example, in aeronautics, which is basically putting a lot of simulation before doing anything productive at scale. And we think now that it's going to be something that is going to be reproduced now at the European level, and even bring in some type of new data sources, such as like space information and things like that. So we backed a company in space tech that is doing exactly that, which is basically gathering climate-conscious information about the buildings, like thermal footprint imagery, etc. So if I had to zoom back, climate tech within real estate has many flavors. Europe is actually on the edge on these topics. If we direct the right level of finance as well as guidance, I think that we'll have an edge there. There is another topic that I would like to speak about more as a, let's say, thematic trend, which I see more and more consolidating. It's everything related to property and facility management at scale. I think that the digitization of the different players now is just beginning, and we've seen that there are several companies which are now doing well in Europe, but also in the US, and you have a bit more consolidation. So just this week, you had 2 major buyouts. So VTS bought a company called Lane, and you have also the guys from, I blink on their name, the guys from HQO bought actually a European company called Office App. So we have things that are consolidating in the market, and we see that actually more is better. And you can see that those guys are trying to build a platform to make it easier for the large, let's say, landlords to just direct that. So property management, facility management at scale, more digitized, is definitely a theme where we see more and more consolidation, with technological players having like under management 1,000+ buildings, which is something that was just, you know, on a roadmap somewhere lost on a on a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation a couple of years ago. So I would say it is a good thing.
Okay, thanks. We have 15 minutes left to talk about the how to go abroad after the whys. Otman, we will stay with you, and Thibaut then. When should a startup start looking at international markets? At what stage? Do you have any use case in mind?
So it's a very good question, and it's a tough one. Definitely part of my investment strategy when I look at a company, it needs to have the ability to become a category leader within its domestic market, but definitely to have a cross-border strategy, and that would be a pass for me if I cannot foresee that company outgrowing its domestic market. So definitely this question is something we ask ourselves very soon in the process, and I think it has many flavors depending of the actual segment. So you have some of the companies that actually need to just sustain the ground and arrive to a certain level, let's say, of critical mass within their domestic market before going international, while you have some others which can actually go international much faster. So I will give like 2 examples, just, you know, for you to situate. Let's say that you have, I don't know, like a computer vision a tool that helps you, I don't know, on construction site or to kind of catch shoplifting in retail or things like that. I would say that the technology itself is transferable, and therefore you can have like a channel partner that gives you the ability to scale in different domestics. So you can be in France and you can go also to another country pretty quickly. But let's say if you have another thing which is much more related, let's say, to a marketplace play, that would be within construction material or things which are related, let's say, to very specific services, then you will need to arrive to a certain level of threshold and concentration, as well as having some positive unit economics in your domestic market before moving. So in the first case, I would say that the company needs to get international as fast as possible because it goes through, let's say, indirect sales partners. While in the other one, if you're scaling through specific use cases and you have very narrow, let's say, value proposition per each geography, you actually need to master one before going to the others. But I think at scale, most of the PropTech companies actually need to think about internationalization, while some of the fields are a bit more complex, and this is more kind of the property marketplace, let's say rental. As you know, it's a heavy SEO, SEM play where you need to outspend your competitors. So usually it's a bit complex to just go and blast in every market. And I think the only one that we've seen which done something similar, it's actually a French company that you might know. It's called IAD. And it's only by outspending that they've been able to attract and to go to other markets, but they had to kind of secure first a core market.
Thank you. Thibaut? When should we go abroad?
I'm abroad. You can please come. Scalability. When should you raise money? All these things. I mean, I think we all wake up here every day and we see a new headline. This company has raised another 10 million, 100 million. new unicorn, etc. And I think, and it's fantastic. And I'm not just talking about PropTech. I'm talking about any tech companies out there today. And so the question is, when should you start thinking about raising? Like, you've raised your seed round, great. You have some good momentum, good tailwinds, a good story to tell. Should you go up for the Series A already? I think one of the things where I've noticed and in rounds is that really, one is we're going to make the distinction between B2B businesses and B2C, where I think the scalability based on this, I'm talking about European companies trying to grow, etc., and trying to grow within the market, perhaps going abroad, meaning outside of Europe, so US, Asia, etc. One should ask themselves this question, for sure. What is your product? What's the fit? What is unique about you? Is it unique in your market? Do you have potential customers overseas? Now, perhaps narrowing down slightly for the French market, the twist here is, of course, the French language is spoken in other countries around the world, but that's not the case. Well, you will need English to be in the US. You will need English to be in Commonwealth countries, for example. And you will need other languages when you go to, you go to Germany or Spain, for example. What matters is understanding the market, understanding your product, understanding the market you're looking into, regulation, what type of customers, what's your competitive landscape, of course. It's not because you've been successful in your market that you're going to be overseas, rather the opposite, actually. I think it's about the team before anything. Like it's not because you have a good idea that you're going to build a good business. And it's not because you have a good team at a certain point in stage in your growth of company that you will have the good team that takes you to the next level and growing, and as part of this. You need to assemble a good consortium of investors. So making sure that you line up the right investors with you that can help you and accompany you into international growth. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are, you need to be mindful of today. When, as I mentioned, there's a lot of money today in the markets. And so raising money is not complicated. It's complicated, but it's not. I mean, there's a lot of money. But finding the right type of capital that takes you, puts you in front of the right people, builds the good equity story, and gets you to the growth path that you want to aspire to, that is something that founders and companies need to think of. To provide an example, you were asking for an example. One of the companies, I think that, so we've invested in a company called Propster, that is a property configuration tool based in Austria. And they have grown from a company in Austria to the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, and German-speaking Switzerland, to now growing, so consolidation, etc., get to the Series A level, and start to think about their growth. They have looked at all the markets in Europe to understand where to grow, and they have turned down certain markets based on the fact that with certain regulations, with certain type of market behaviors, you cannot grow in these markets, and that's fine. Don't go to Sweden if there's no market for you in Sweden. Try it in the UK. You don't know if you're going to have a chance to succeed in this market, but there is at least some good story to be told to your investors about growing in this market. And we're starting to see this today. So I think it's important to ask yourself all these questions, the same that you ask yourself every day when you grow a business, is what is my market? How can I grow? If I invest $1 in this project, what's going to be the return on capital, both for our company and for our investors?
Natasha, Costa, how to decide where to go, how to test it, how to go? Country manager, build up, acquisition?
There's no right and wrong answer with that, it really depends on the business the company is in, on technology they represent. We saw businesses growing in different strategies, sometimes via distribution, sometimes by having a team there. And it really depends which market they're going to. For example, scaling across Europe is a very different story than going to the US. So that is quite often the story with an outspan. So you really need to have the budget. You really need to know the markets. And even before you go anywhere, you need to make sure that the business in the domestic market is sustainable. That your business and the uptake of the technology where you come from is solid and strong. When is a question is like, how long is the piece of string? Mainly, but I will be happy to share the stories. What is in my experience is really good case study on the collaboration in this panel. We have two companies in our European portfolio. One is MyRI and another one is SmartPoint. Both came to us when they didn't have presence in the UK. And Thibault, thank you very much for almost doing my VC pitch. We are the people that position ourselves as strategic institutional investor. We do a lot of legwork to make sure that our companies start sitting conversations early in different regions to understand the legal framework, to understand the differences between, say, I don't know, France and the UK, because sometimes the regulatory environment in some countries is so favorable, but it doesn't mean that it will translate to other region or territory.
Costa?
Yeah, so I think we've said a lot on this topic, and I think you guys mentioned a lot of good examples. What we always do when we enter in a company and have the first board call, and it's an early stage company, we always try to explain them that at some point you need to internationalize, and if you want international money, you need to have a clear roadmap to go international. So, but at the same time, being international from the beginning is very expensive because, as you just said, spending a lot of money on sales and marketing is very, very easy, and at the same time forgetting to focus on building a good product. So what we always say is try to build a product that is international, but try to move sales into the future. So for example, one company from our portfolio, it's a marketplace, it's called Wunderflats, and what they did, it's like a midterm rental marketplace. It's today the largest in Germany. They have the biggest accounts of landlords because they only focused on acquiring landlords in Germany and building the product on an international scale. So they started early on understanding how rental processes work all around Europe, building the product for Germany, doing sales only in Germany, growing the main business very, very large. And now what they do, they test different marketers by using the same landlords. So they question the landlords, hey guys, we're going now to Paris. Do you want to upload your apartments from Paris to our platform? And we market them. And this is like a very, very cost-efficient way for them to grow internationally. So this is not the one answer, but I think this is one answer you can always try. Build a product that works not only in your home country, but internationally. Be ready, select countries by, I don't know, similarities, language, behavior of the customer, regulatory framework if needed, and then try to, if you have the funds, try to explain your investor, hey guys, this is how we will move into the next country, and then you need to test it.
Thank you. I think we are short on time, so we will wait for next year to ask the bonus question I prepared. Sorry, suspense. I want to thank you very much. Thank you for coming, you all, and you all as well. I think it's time for you to meet each other. The idea was also to find this opportunity for these European investors to come and meet the French PropTech ecosystem. So there we are. Thank you, everybody, and see you right now if you want.